Welcome back to our next edition of the CBB Review Studio podcast. I am Dan Siegel, joined as always by my co-host Ben Anderson, and we are back with another edition of CBB Rank. We are counting down finally into the top 25. So today we've got 25 through 21. Of course, while you're here, please, if you have not already, we would love it if you would subscribe to our channel here, either on YouTube or on the audio platforms, Apple Podcast, Spotify, etc. We have an interview with Micah Shrewsbury actually that just went up there. So on the Courtside show, which is also on our podcasting network. So be sure to check that out and check out 100 through 26. We have episodes in increments of 5. So if you found us recently, check that out as well. But let's get started in this episode. So number 25 in our CBB rank, we've got TCU, the Horned Frogs, who are coming off of a season where, they were pretty much the fringe top 25 team, and then they lost in the round of 32, and they lose a couple pieces, most notably Mike Miles. And then they bring in what I think is a really good mid-major transfer class. This TCU program has not had consistency in a long, long time, but for the third straight year, I'm confident this is a good TCU team.
Yeah, absolutely. This team should make the NCAA tournament under Jamie Dixon for the third straight year, like you mentioned before. Question is whether it can make the second weekend for the first time since Jamie Dixon was the head coach in Fort Worth. One thing I'll point out is that I do think I prefer the backcourt of Mike Miles and Damian Ball that they had last year over Avery Anderson III and Jameer Nelson Jr. that they're going to have this year. But Nelson can get a bucket, right? He was an excellent player at Delaware for all 3 years that he was there. He led them into the NCAA tournament last year. So I really expect a lot from him. Avery Anderson, I think you sort of know what you get. He knows what the Big 12 is like as well, coming in from Oklahoma State. So I think those are two both solid additions. The thing I'm most worried about here is the front court, specifically the center position. They are relying a lot on the fact that Ernest Udeh will be the guy at center, I think. They have a lot of good pieces around him, but specifically Emmanuel Miller and Micah Peavy. I think both are really strong additions in the forward, returners at the forward position. But yeah, Udeh Jr., I think he really needs to be able to take on that burden after just a year at Kansas. But if that happens, I really do like this TCU team. I think they can compete for a double bye in the Big 12 tournament.
So here's the thing, right? If we're talking about a guy who needs to break out and fits the mold of a freshman to sophomore breakout perfectly, I think it's actually Ernest Udeh, because this guy was a McDonald's All-American who he went to Kansas, like you said, and then he didn't really get the playing time, and he was actually slotted to really play a key role at Kansas until, what happens late in the transfer portal cycle, or relatively late, they get Hunter Dickinson. So there goes a lot of your playing time. You now hit the portal. Udeh goes to TCU. So he qualifies for that spot, in my opinion, in the same conference. TCU also, they need that hole they need to fill that hole that was left in the production by Eddie Lampkin, who is off to Colorado. We talked about them in the last episode. Lampkin wasn't a star, but he was just a really good anchor piece. And there's no reason to think that Ernest Udeh is not capable of that. I know the backcourt probably isn't as good, but I do like the balance of the mid-major producer at a really high margin, and then you've got your solid guy returning at the Big 12 level, or at least in the same conference that is more proven at this level. I think that's a really solid backcourt, and to have kind of both, that's a good mold to build a well-rounded team. I think also some things to keep in mind when we're talking about TCU is we always talk about the Big 12 and all those teams have really, really difficult schedules, but all things considered, it's pretty favorable for TCU, considering they play in the most difficult league in the country, because their non-conference schedule is extremely weak. They're in the Diamond Head Classic. I think they're the best team in there by a pretty decent margin. And then their best opponents are Georgetown, Arizona State, Clemson. Those are maybe tournament teams. And then you also, in the conference, you play Houston and Texas just once. That's two of your top three in the Big 12. So TCU did not get votes in the AP poll. That's the final subject I'm going to talk about with these Horned Frogs. In my opinion, the Big 12 is somehow underrepresented in the AP poll. Do you think TCU is one of those teams that should have at least been like considered? Because we have them in our own top 25.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer because you can't. I would say that they deserve votes in the top 25, but I wouldn't necessarily turn around and vote them in my top 25 myself. I'd have to do just a little bit more digging. I don't believe I had them in the top 25 when I was looking at my rankings, but I think I was surprised to see them not get a single vote. I think that's a little bit underranking. That puts them like 39th, 40th, right, or something like that. Especially in the preseason where everyone gets votes. I think we're taking a little bit of Jamie Dixon for granted when it comes to TCU because this is not a good job. This is not an easy job. There was no success before he came back here. This is his alma mater, so really just showing that he can put it into a solid program is really impressive. One last thing I'll say before we can move on. We spent a little bit on TCU, but they can go potentially 10 deep. Right, they have producers up and down the level. You mentioned a couple of mid-major guys that you really liked. I'll mention them by name. Travian Tennyson coming in from Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and then Issa Mustafa coming in from Coastal Carolina have both scored double digits. Then you have players like Jacoby Coles and Xavier Cork. I mean, there are players up and down the roster, so it'll be interesting to see what the final rotation looks like.
All right, we move on to number 24, who we have as San Diego State, who is a little bit lower because we have the AP poll out. I just mentioned it with TCU. They're a little bit lower in CBB rank than they are in the AP poll. 24th in CBB rank and 17th in the AP poll. It's a case of you're coming off of a lot of success in the NCAA tournament and a 5 seed, so a lot of success in the regular season. And you succeed in 1 year, you return a chunk of that team. In my opinion, that's the recipe for a pretty highly ranked preseason team. Now, the one concern I do have is that they did not attack the portal as hard as some of their peers in this top 25. But honestly, and I hate to do this because I don't usually make this statement, but I think I agree with the AP poll more than our peers, at least in this specific topic. I agree with the AP poll more than our peers here at CBB Review.
I don't know. I think I'm the opposite of you. I think they are properly placed in our CBB Review top 100. I think the AP poll has them a little bit too high. I really like the backcourt. I really like the pickup of Reese Dixon Waters from USC. I think that's a really solid transfer. He didn't show a ton all the time when he was in Los Angeles, but he has a lot of potential still, in my opinion. Even as a senior, he has a lot of experience as well at the power conference level, and getting him to come to the Mountain West, I think, is a big deal. What I'm really concerned about is the rotation and what it looks like on the court altogether. We know what Lamont Butler is, and we know what Darren Trammell is, right? They're going to come back and be a solid backcourt, solid starting backcourt for Brian Dutcher. But I just what does the front court look like? And is it going to be Micah Parrish, Jaden Ledee, and then are you going to really rely on Jay Powell, who's a Campbell transfer? That's not Ernest Uday, like we just talked about, right? That's not a freshman to sophomore leap that we might be seeing overall. So that's something I'm a little concerned about. But I trust Brian Dutcher to have a really good team. I think top 25 is fair, just right around this 25-30 range is where I'd have him as opposed to top 17.
I don't know. I think continuity, in my opinion, is the biggest strength of this team because you mentioned the front court, but I'll just go over what we have as our full starting lineup. So we got Lamont Butler, Darren Trammell, Reese Dixon Waters, Micah Parrish, and we I forgot who wrote this article, but whoever wrote it had Jay Powell. I think Ledee is probably going to slot into that center spot, at least if I had to guess, but we'll put him there as like the 5A, 5B of the starting lineup. Nothing has really changed that much. You have Dixon Waters replacing Matt Bradley, who I think that's close to a net neutral. I don't think that's a major downgrade there. So really, there's no reason to think this team's identity will change in any way. I think they will be a top tier defensive team. They were top 2 last year in the metrics. I'll say safely they'll be top 10 this year. They're not full of studs offensively, but the reason they made such a big tournament run is because they're just flexible in how they could attack you, and I think that'll be the same this year. I think they're going to win a lot of games in the Mountain West. And I know, Ben, several episodes ago, we all jumped on that New Mexico Lobos hype train, and we're like, this is a really underrated team. You said the Lobos were your team to beat in the Mountain West. I'm still on San Diego State.
And I think I stand by, even after doing more research for this pod on San Diego State. I just think we're really downplaying the losses of Kashad Johnson and Nathan Mensah. I'm a little worried to see how that translates over. I still really do like Ladie and Parrish, and I think Paul will have playing opportunities for Brian Dutcher, but those are two really important players for the Aztecs last year. I'm interested to see how that adjusts for Brian Dutcher.
Well, we are going to stay on the West Coast for number 23, St. Mary's. We're going from the Mountain West to the WCC. And Ben, we talked about this off air. We both think the WCC is not going to be as good of a product as last year by a pretty decent margin. I mean, from a St. Mary's perspective, first off, you're ranked 23. You're thrilled, right? Like, you're a top 25 team as St. Mary. You're thrilled. But I expect the West Coast Conference to regress pretty much from the top tier with Gonzaga and St. Mary's. A slight regression, right? Like, they're both top 25 teams, and St. Mary's actually picked to win the WCC. But I expect those two to regress. And then I expect that, like, second tier to really regress in the sense that we don't have any CBB ranked teams in the top 100 besides those two. And we also, the preseason Torvik had 5 last year in the WCC in the top 100, just 2 in the preseason. So I don't want to make this a crapping on the WCC segment, but I just wanted to put that out there because this is our first team in CBB rank.
Yeah, and also, you didn't even mention this, but BYU is not in the conference anymore, and that's a big loss from a basketball perspective for them as well. I think that was BYU in our top 100. I don't remember. I don't think they were, but like that's a clear third best team in the WCC, regardless of whether they're in our top 100 this year. But now they're off to the Big 12, so that's something to consider. That being said, I actually do think a weaker WCC slightly plays into St. Mary's favor because they're going to rack up wins in this conference, in my opinion. And I think they'll do it enough, and they have enough of a brand at this point under Randy Bennett to get the benefit of the doubt from the selection committee and get a bid, even though their strength of schedule is not going to be the highest. If you look at their notable non-conference games, they do have some solid ones. I mean, they basically sweep the Mountain West, go over. They play New Mexico, San Diego State, who we just mentioned, and Colorado State. So they're getting all the top teams on the West Coast for the mid-majors. So that's good. But I really I think they're going to win a lot of games. I'm not sure how good I'm not sure they're going to be better than last year's team was. And I think that's sort of where I've landed on it. They don't really add a ton, and that's sort of what I'm concerned about. They do add an interesting point guard in Jordan Ross, who was one of their highest rated recruits ever, maybe the highest, I'm not quite sure, the highest rated recruit ever to come to St. Mary's. So that will be their starting point guard likely. Aiden Mahaney is a name to note here. He blew up on the scene as a freshman last year and is looking to continue that into his sophomore season. And then you have 2 solid players in Alex Dukas and Mitchell Saxton. Other than that, I mean, it's sort of like San Diego State in the fact that they have a lot of players that know their role and players that know how to do their job on St. Mary's. It's been the case for a while now, and I don't expect that to change. We'll have to see a couple people step up from the bench, but overall, I think this is a team that will win a lot of games, and I'm pretty confident in that prediction.
I mean, you see Aiden Mahaney's freshman season, and then you see a guy coming in to play kind of a similar role the next year that is higher rated than Aiden Mahaney. That's a good sign for you. So that I'm referring to Jordan Ross right there. Honestly, I am not the biggest fan of Aiden Mahaney, or maybe that's not fair to say. I think maybe other people kind of will rate him on their preseason player list a little bit higher than I will. I think Aiden Mahaney is a phenomenal player. I don't want people to misinterpret that because of just how many points he put up as a freshman. But I also look at the fact that in big games last year, with the exception of maybe that second half of the Gonzaga win that they had, he kind of disappeared. Like, even you just look at the last 3 games, 7 points in the WCC finals, their third game against Gonzaga. And then he had 0 points in the NCAA tournament game they won against VCU, and then 9 lost to UConn. So Aiden Mahaney is a heck of a player, but I'm not ready to give him that superstar status yet. Honestly, the biggest strength might be the front court, where you got Dukas and Saxon, your stretch big, and then your true big, and both are efficient at what they do. I still, and I know I started this segment by saying like the WCC is not going to be as good. The two St. Mary's versus Gonzaga games will still be bangers. I mean, they'll probably be top 25 matchups. There'll be games. I always love the fast pace versus slow pace, like clashing together, and that's exactly what you get with those two. But what are your final thoughts on St. Mary's?
Yeah, I think we really covered it. This is going to be a good team that wins a lot of games. Are we sure that it's the best St. Mary's team we've seen in the last 5 years? Probably not, but I don't think that'll matter, especially in a down West Coast conference.
All right, number 22, Kentucky. There's a lot to talk about here. I don't see a world where Calipari is like let go. I know that's been a lot, the talk around the program, but the fan pressure, you can't ignore it. The fan pressure is so there this year, and every year the hype is around that freshman class, but this year it's historic. Like, right? Like, it's not just me. This year is the year that they have the absolute top tier freshman class.
Yeah, they were talking about this freshman class like in November of last year when the games were still like just getting started, right? They're like, look, next year is going to be the year. Trust us. Look at this class. And they do have 3 of the top 10 players in the 247 Sports Composite coming in, as well as Reed Shepherd, who's coming in, and another 5-star point guard in Rob Dillingham. The biggest key to this team, though, and its success specifically, I think, is the return of Antonio Reeves and the addition of Trey Mitchell. A lot of Calipari's best teams had a couple of veteran presences that really put the team together, taped it together, and made it a little bit more of a holistic team. So I really like that the fact that both Reeves and Mitchell are in Lexington. I think that adds a lot to the overall expectations and the overall ceiling as well for the Wildcats. My question is, look, I'm not a scout. I don't pretend to be a guy that can go in and rank high school players from 1 to 75 or anything like that. But Justin Edwards looks fantastic. I mean, he's everything you want in a modern wing. And then you have DJ Wagner, of course, who is the son of Dwan Wagner, who played for Calipari when he was at Memphis. So you got a lot of stuff going on there. Number 6 overall recruit. And then you have Aaron Bradshaw, who is this massive center, who's probably going to get a lot of time as well. He's been struggling with some injuries, but we'll see how that goes at the beginning of the season. I mean, there's not much to say in a prediction standpoint for Kentucky, just because there's so many freshmen that we don't exactly know how they're going to pan out on the court in a real college game. But Calipari's got to win with this roster, in my opinion.
Yeah, based on recent previous tendencies, I could absolutely see this team underwhelming, even falling on its face. But I also I see the vision with this team, and because of those two elements, I think we could strike a healthy balance and put it at 22. That's fair for me. But I see the vision. Like, they have a lot of NBA talent. They have your established veteran bucket getters. You talked about Mitchell and Reeves. My question is, what do you think they will do exceptional? I think it'll be different from the past. In the past, it's been getting a million offensive rebounds when you are not putting the ball in the basket, when you're missing shots. That's how you're going to account for it. But I don't think that's going to be this team. This team, I think, is going to be a very good 3-point shooting team. In a conference, really, where the 3-ball doesn't really reign too much in the SEC, the Wildcats could stand out. They've got really a galore of wings and bigs that could shoot. I mean, I'm looking at the returners in Reeves and Mitchell especially. An interesting guy to keep an eye on that I'm not sure we mentioned yet is Zvonimir Ivasic, who, I mean, we keep an eye on him really on both ends. He's one of those really highly rated international guys as a true freshman. So it's 3-point shooting, and it's also defense, because that's where Kentucky needs to reach their ceiling. It resides around their team defending an elite level. They've been outside the top 30 in defensive efficiency, according to Torvik, since that 2019 to 2020 season. So that year and every year since, they've been outside the top 30. the previous 5 years, they were inside the top 30. So I do think they have a lot of upside on the defensive end to get back inside that top 30, but they're going to need to if they want to reach their ceiling.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. One last name to put out there is Adu Fierro. We've been hearing really positive reports from Kentucky of his freshman to sophomore jump. So we'll see if that happens. He could be a solid option at the wing, especially if the freshmen aren't ready. Only problem with ranking Kentucky 22nd is that I think that either this team's going to finish ranked in the top 10 or finish unranked. Like there is no in between. They're not going to be just good. I think they're either going to be great or not very good at all. And then we have a conversation about Cal, but I think this is a fair point to start at for the preseason at least.
All right, number 21. Back to the Big 12 we go. Baylor, I think quite the opposite of the statement you just made regarding Baylor. This is a fair ranking. Like I most likely see Baylor finishing at exactly like the 21 range. In the AP poll, they're number 20. That's completely fair. On one hand, they lose their entire backcourt from last season. There's that three-headed monster in Cryer, Flagler, and Keontae Johnson, who everybody was raving about. They're all gone. So on one hand, you don't have that. On the other hand, the roster is not awful, and any like roster that has some redeeming qualities, and then you have Scott Drew as your head coach. They're in my top 25.
Yeah, I think this is a fair ranking for Baylor. I'm not super excited about anything in particular when it comes to this Bears team. I don't think this is going to be a national title contender or even a Big 12 contender. I think they'll be really solid. I think no one will want to go to Waco to play them. I don't think no one will want to play them at home, right? Ray J. Dennis is a star from Toledo. He should have very little problem, in my opinion, playing up to the power conference level. Jaden Nunn is a solid defensive piece that they added from VCU, so I like that. And then, of course, they have there seem to be yearly five-star guard. This time is Jacoby Walter, which people seem to be very high on. Jonathan Chachua returns as a centerpiece of the front court, which is something that we expect from Baylor at this point. I don't think we expect much production from their forward and center positions, but it's always nice to have. Jalen Bridges returns as well to add a nice piece at the small forward position. I mean, this is a classic Baylor team that isn't going to blow your mind, but will also be very solid in a tough Big 12.
Yeah, like they got your a little bit of everything. Like you got your proven veteran, and then you got your lottery pick, and you got your role player returners, and then you got your freshman depth. Like it's a little bit here and a little bit there, and no superstar, or at least nobody off the top of my head that I think right now will be considered a superstar at the Big 12 level. It would have to be kind of unexpected. But despite this scattering of players here, you just got to go back to your faith in Scott Drew, and it's like, okay, with certain coaches, there's a lot of question marks. How does it fit all together? I don't know. But with Scott Drew, it's just, I think you could have confidence in that. And like I said, the identity will completely change. I don't know what exactly their identity will be, because last year, like I said, it was the 3 stud guards, and they will have to adjust this year. I don't know what their identity will be. Maybe it's just being good at everything and having no flaws. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's probably it. I can see exactly how this team was put together, and I can see exactly what they will do on the court. So this is one of the teams I'm more confident in my ranking of than basically any other that we've talked about so far. I'm very confident that Baylor will be exactly a top 20 to top 25 team. So kudos to Scott Drew for building a really solid team that seems to fit well together. And let's see if he can do more than we expect with it.
Yeah. I mean, as far as the Big 12 is concerned, so I don't think I'm spoiling anything, because if you guys have been following the entire CBB rank, you know that we haven't said Texas, Houston, or Kansas yet. I'm not going out on a limb and spoiling anything to tell you guys that they will be in our top 20 rather than outside our top 100. So anyway, so the top 3 in the Big 12 are Texas, Houston, and Kansas, in other words. And then your next 3, we have Baylor, who we're talking about right now, at number 21. You got TCU, we just talked about at 25, and then Kansas State a couple episodes ago at 31. I like Baylor. It's very safe to say they will be in that next 3 tier, that 3 to that 4 to 6 range in the Big 12.
Yep, absolutely agree.
Yeah, like there's no way they finish. Not no way, but it's unlikely that they finish in that top 3. I think we'll talk about Texas, Houston, Kansas, wherever they land in our top 20. They have significantly more upside. Anyway, that will do it for today's edition of the CBB Review Studio podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe if you have found us and have not done so already. Once again, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and take care.